Okay. So this is our program for the year, for the semester. Principles of Kabbalah. Today is the second part. Thanks for being patient. We're going to get through some the foundations. Some foundations I think are that really speak to me and I think are beneficial for humanity. So we're going to get through that today, and then we're going to dig into some fun topics.
We don't get to the ghosts until later.
Not well, yeah, not yet.
February.
You'll tell if you encounter them beforehand. You'll let me know. What?
Laurie said she's not able to unmute.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know.
Let me
Maybe that's
see.
intentional.
Are you able? Nothing personal. Let me see. Are you guys able to unmute yourselves? Lynn, can you unmute yourself? Lynn, let me see if it works. Dad, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I can unmute myself.
Oh, cool. Okay. All right, so I'm going to mute you now. Sorry. All right, but you can unmute yourselves if you want to, get some feedback, or I'm going to try to check in with people on Zoom as well. Okay. This is what we did last week. Okay, it's a reminder. We talked about what is Kabbalah. We talked about the three streams of Kabbalah. Remember that? Okay, here's your quiz. What are the three streams of Kabbalah? Stuart. What are the three kinds of Kabbalah? All right, let's ask at home.
Theoretical,
Yeah.
magical.
Yeah.
This is a group effort, folks.
Oh, okay.
Practical.
That was good. Just as good as when she said it. What's the third one? I'll give you a hint.
Meditation.
Okay. Meditate. Okay, those are the three.
Spiritual.
Spiritual, it definitely is spiritual, but they're all spiritual. But the three kinds are magical, theoretical, and meditative. Meditative is us going up. Magical is bringing God's blessing down through amulets and all kinds of other actions. And theoretical is like describing what's going on above. So those are the three streams. Through our course, we're going to touch on all the streams. That's why I wanted to introduce that to you. Back here, Yashar Koach. Let's
Snack.
muted somebody.
Nick says.
Okay. I forgot to tell you to take a Am I a Mystic quiz. I still want to send that to you this week. Maybe you'll take and see if you're a mystic. Okay. And if you're not, by the end of this course, you definitely will be. Okay. So we did this last week. This week we're talking about. If you remember, we talked about how God's intimate. The first principle I wanted to talk about is God is intimately connected to our lives, and we talked about how God kind of, according to the story of the Tzimtzum, God kind of was always present, and God kind of made space for humanity to exist. It's very different than God creating something from above, below. God was everywhere, and God made space, and in that space within God, humanity was created. So God's all around all the time. We don't always see it, and that's where free will comes in. That's where all bad and evil comes in. But it's a beautiful idea that God's always close to us. It's just God made space in a humble way to allow us in and to enjoy good things. So here's the description of that, actually. This is from the Arizal. So I brought one of his books. We're going to talk a little bit about like central books in Kabbalah today. That'll be like a little intro. Then we're going to get to the other three principles of Kabbalah that I want to talk about. So that's the structure for today. I'm doing a little review. We're going to talk a little bit about major texts in Kabbalah, and then we're going to do the other three principles. So as we're doing this review of last week's first principle, is that Hashem's intimately connected to everything, that everything's really interconnected, and that's Kabbalah. Everything's interconnected because everything's part of God in a way. So here's the text that I'm reading this to you because right now you have energy, and we're in the beginning of the class, and this is a central text, and we're going to touch on this a little bit later on today. So I want to read it. We didn't read it last time. This is the Arizal, 16th century mystic. He says, prior to creation, there was only the infinite or Ein Sof filling all existence. So God's infinity was filling everything. Just try to picture it. It's hard to picture, right? I don't know. But when it arose in God's will to create worlds and emanate the emanated, he contracted, it seemed to himself, in the point at the center, in the very center of his light. He restricted that light, distancing it to the sides surrounding the central point. So there remained a void. It's called a hollow empty space away from the central point. After this Tzimtzum, he drew down the divine light, a single straight line of light from above to below, and it chained down, sending into that void. In the space of that void, he emanated creative force and made all the worlds. So that's kind of like what this picture is. That's this picture. Basically, God made this space, and then back into that space, which is really in God. God created an avenue for us to elevate ourselves towards God, and that's this ray of light. And this ray is basically the Torah, the mitzvos, everything good. Through doing good things, you kind of elevate yourself out of the darkness, out of the halal. That's the Arizal, the Kabbalah's like mode of the how creation happened, and the positive element I said about it is this: we have this way of coming up to God through the line, but we're always in God. You just have to see it. That's a beautiful thing. I've shared this with you before, but when we say the Shema, we close our eyes, right? If you read the halachic books, it says we're doing it to concentrate. You don't have any distractions. But I've heard it said that when we close our eyes, we do it to remind ourselves that God's in everything. It's hard to see it sometimes, this person's bothering you, this person at work's driving, I don't know, whatever. But then when you close your eyes, take a break, you're able to see God's in everything. Or at least to think that way. God is one. So that's like the idea. So I brought the Rebbe, Lubavitcher Rebbe. Basically, the Lubavitcher Rebbe was like made space. Rebbes in general make space for their students so they don't give them everything at once. They make space so they can teach them where they are. That's the idea of contraction. And then we said that if everything's united in God, so everything is, there's inner unity in existence. And that's what we're hoping for, to bring humanity back to that place of unity in the future days. That's why that's an element I really like about Kabbalah. It's seeing how everything's united, not just humans, not just Jews, but like all the species and the worlds, the spiritual worlds, everything's connected. So if you do something here, you can impact something somewhere else. I think that's a very powerful idea. I'm going to actually speak about this Shabbat in Shul, but I'll just give you a preview. Like, I think that, a lot of us internally believe this, because sometimes we say, let's say Tehillim on behalf of people in Israel or something like that. So we believe that it has an impact somehow. What you're doing has an impact. Or we also believe in the mezuzah. Mezuzah, some people, if bad things are happening, they'll change their mezuzahs. We believe that these experiences have impact. Like, things that happen around us have impact on us, on our house, on what's going on. So internally, I think a lot of us do believe in this in some way. Maybe we don't believe in it, like we're not mystics or whatever, but I think that we do believe there's a connection, like there's bad energy and impacted everybody's energy in the room or something like that. So I think that we have concepts like this in our minds. So
just ask me, could
yeah.
some of this have something to do with like superstitions too?
Yeah.
Like, I'm always afraid if I say this never happened to me, then usually it does happen, so I'm afraid to say it.
Yeah.
But you kind of think like God's with you.
Correct.
You don't want to jinx anything.
So there is such a thing, like the evil eye. There's such thing as putting out certain words or like jinxing. I don't know what the Jewish definition for that is, but you're supposed to sometimes keep things private, and when things are more private, there's more ability for the blessing to reside. There's a concept like that. Now, again, I'm teaching you mysticism, but I want to just be clear that this is one stream of Judaism. There's rationalism as well, and it's very different, and they all blend together. But when we're learning Kabbalah, so I would say it's okay to have our superstitions and our feelings, but if we end up being run by them, then we're not attending to other parts of our tradition, like more level-headed rationalist approaches, I think are helpful as well. So you might get into that space a little bit in my class, but because we're learning it in an extensive way, but just to know that there's other components of our tradition, you have to be kind of well balanced. So I also have that too. For many years, I was watching the Eagles every game, and they weren't winning for many years, and I just stopped watching them. Now they're winning very a lot. So I was kind of I'm not going to watch them because they're going to keep winning. But it didn't work. It didn't work in the playoffs. I don't know. Maybe because I was paying attention. I don't know. I also actually I don't know. I have it too. I don't know if anybody else feels this. Do you feel like when you're watching a sports game from home, like you can impact the game by your cheering? Do you feel that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So like, we don't have cable. We have like, apps or whatever. So we download the NFL apps to watch games, but it has like a delay. I was like, I'm not watching it. I can't impact the game that way. It's on a delay. Yeah. Anyway, so all right, so we're in class. Let's kind of begin class number 2. I saw Nadine. Do you want to say something? I see you're unmuted. Nadine, did you want to say something? I see you're unmuted. Is that on purpose?
No, I just couldn't hear.
Oh, can you hear?
So I came closer to the computer.
Okay. I mean, okay, sorry. Okay. All right, so here's our class 2 principle called Kabbalah part 2. So here, in central text, the second principle I want to talk about, I'm going to talk about 4 altogether. There's many, okay? Here's 4 that speak to me and that I think have interesting texts connected to them. Our actions impact reality. It's kind of what we talked about just now. Evil is real and we must combat it. Okay, I think that's a nice thing that you can lift from the Kabbalah, that there is evil in the world. I think our society sometimes gets confused when it comes to that, and it's to our detriment. And lastly, taking the good from the bad. So that will be the principles I want to talk about. All right, so let's talk about some central texts in Kabbalah. Okay, let me just pause for a second. Any questions on last week's class or anything you're thinking about right now before we move on? Cool. All right, so I'm going to pass around these texts here. This is take a look at this. There are these 4 books here. I'll show you what we have, and I'll pass it around. But it's good to see it. This is this is the Zohar. Okay, this is the central Kabbalistic text. Like, we have parts of Zohar in our prayers. You know that song we sing, that's from the Zohar, believe it or not. It's Brich Shmei. There are many other passages from the Zohar. In Halacha, we follow the Zohar a lot. It's a central Kabbalistic text. And it's at least was recorded in the like the 13th century. But we're going to see tradition believes it goes back earlier. So this is the Hebrew version. This is just a few, there's different volumes I just brought 2. Here is, this is a nice one. It's Classics of Western Spirituality. And this one is just like central article from the Zohar, translated to English by Daniel Matt. And Daniel Matt was responsible for translating the whole Zohar. There's like, I don't know, like maybe 12, I don't know how many, 12, 20, I don't know how many. There's a lot of these volumes. I have like 9 of them. And I'll pass this around, translated into English with footnotes. And so when you read the Zohar, if you ever get a chance to, it's a lot of imagery. Pass these around. A lot of imagery, a lot of it's just theoretical Kabbalah, meaning it's basically describing what's going on in the world from a mystical perspective. And there's a lot of imagery, there's a lot of descriptions, there's a lot of good and bad, evil and light and dark. Many believe that, in at least religious circles, that just reading the Zohar, even without understanding it, can have an impact, not in English, but the Hebrew, Aramaic. So many believe that. And so just read Zohar. You'll see people in shul, like Sephardic shuls, older people, it's like reading Zohar, because I believe it has an impact on the soul. So, but we're going to kind of learn, we're trying to learn like the principles connected to it. I wanted to pass it on so you could see it. So here are like 2 accounts for how the Zohar came into existence. We have the traditional approach, which I'll just tell you on the outside, is that Rabbi Shimon, the central figure in the Zohar is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Ever heard his name before?
Yeah.
So if you ever had Lag BaOmer, ever celebrate Lag BaOmer, his name is pretty prevalent on that holiday. So his name appears all throughout the Zohar. He was a Tannaitic figure, meaning from 2,000 years ago. Okay, And so the traditional approach, like on the Chabad website, for instance, that I brought, and in other circles, is that this was written down in the 13th century, recorded, but it didn't start then. These are ancient teachings that were passed along through the generations, eventually recorded at that time period by Rabbi Moshe de Leon, who was a rabbi in that period, and others as well. Academics don't heed to that approach, and they don't take that approach into account. They basically say it's clear that Moshe de Leon wrote it himself and attributed it to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and so there's different approaches connected to it. But here's the traditional one. The Book of Zohar is the primary text of the Kabbalah. It contains the teachings and doings of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his disciples, who flourished in the land of Israel in the 2nd century. For many years, it was carefully guarded, and most Jews did not even know of its existence until it was disseminated by Rabbi Moshe de Leon in the 13th century. There are many accounts for like why it was like hidden, but really, throughout our history, there was always a hidden tradition that it wasn't shared with the masses, and so you can make an argument that because of that, the nature of that was passed on in small groups, and eventually he brought it to light. In ancient Aramaic, the standard Zohar is divided into 3 volumes with sections corresponding to the 54 portions of the Torah. So that's that. Now, Wikipedia brings Gershom Shalom, who was one of the central, who was a central researcher, and he basically said that De Leon was the most likely author. So here are his reasons: the Zohar's frequent errors in Aramaic grammar, its suspicious traces of Arabic and Spanish words and sentence patterns, and its lack of knowledge of the land of Israel, among other proofs. So he brought different proofs to show that it was written in a later period. But if you go if you're in any traditional circles, they believe these are ancient teachings that go much further back. I just wanted to show you the other approach. Now, what's interesting is later approaches, which is Yehuda Liebes and others, they say it wasn't just one author. There are multiple authors, multiple groups of mystics that got together, and the Zohar is just a compilation of like a lot of teachings from a lot of different periods of mystical circles, which is interesting as well. Now, so that's a little bit on the Zohar. The Zohar really is, it's taken into account in all areas of Jewish life. In davening, in halacha, Jewish law, a lot of stuff's based on the Zohar. And so the Zohar is a text to know about. And if you ever merit to learn it, it's very powerful. All right, so the next test I want to show you, discuss, kind of go over with you is the Arizal. So that's these. I mean, it's also Hebrew. I mean, probably won't. You can take a look at it anyway. Here's it's called Priyat Chaim. I have a full set of the Arizal's works. These are the names you're going to hear in Kabbalistic discussions. Zohar, the Ari. The Ari stands for Rabbi Isaac Luria. It's an acronym. The godly Yitzchak, godly Rabbi Isaac of blessed memory. It's an acronym, Arizal. His name was Rabbi Isaac Yitzchak. So what I want to share with you about him is that he took the Zohar and made it a little bit more understandable. And so that was his contribution. And he basically took the Kabbalistic world by storm. He has a lot of books. He didn't write any of them. And they all were written in 2 years. And he passed away at age 38. Yeah, very young, very young. And so if you say, Rabbi, you have to be 40 to learn Kabbalah. He passed away before the age of 40, and he knew a lot in Kabbalah. So when he taught his Kabbalistic teachings, it really took over. And mystical yeshivas nowadays, Kabbalistic yeshivas, they're learning a lot of his texts. That's basically what they're learning. His approach was much more nuanced, is much more connective. It was much more like detail oriented as well, kind of like explaining all the details of what's going on in the upper worlds. And a lot of our stuff's also based on him. Hasidism took a lot of the Arizal's principles and applied them as well. Yeah, Ari from Tzfat. So I have 2 pictures here. Here's just some of his books. Over here in the corner is the Ari's Mikvah. And Ari's Mikvah, it's in Tzfat. So Arizal, there was a time for 80 years in Tzfat in the 16th century where there was a huge resurgence of Judaism after the expulsion from Spain. And they relocated into Tzfat, the north in Israel. And And there were mystics like all over Tzfat at that time. There's a big grave, there's a cemetery there. And if you look into the cemetery in Tzfat, you'll see a lot of like light blue gravestones. That's the color, like it's a mystical color. And there are a lot of graves there of mystics. And so I actually have a video, maybe I'll link to it, where I was there this summer. I went there with Figgy. I made her like walk all the way through the cemeteries and stuff. She really loves me. So we went to the, it wasn't ghost, but we went to the mikvah, the Ari's mikvah, which is in the corner here. It's very cold, but it's supposed to be like it's a natural stream, and it's a spiritual experience. So what I want to share with you a little bit about his work. Let me see. Do I have anything here? This is it, but it's hard to detect any system or structure. Once one knows the Ari, the knowledge of the Zohar begins to unfold. What's very interesting is like there was Rabbi Moshe Cordovero was also buried in Tzfat. He was like about to take the lead as like the head Kabbalist at the time, and then Ari came in and introduced all of his teachings and kind of like overshadowed him. But so that's just like some names to know about. You'll hear about those names if you learn Kabbalah. So I just want to show that to you. The final thing I wanted to show you, final stage I wanted to show you, is the Hasidism. Okay, and so I was like kind of looking for a good summary of Hasidut, and I could have done it myself, but instead I did it with ChatGPT, and this is what came out, which I agree with it. Okay, Hasidut, also known as Hasidus or Hasidus Judaism, this is from ChatGPT, is a movement within the Orthodox Judaism that originated in the 18th century in Eastern Europe. The term Hasidut is derived from the word Hasid, which means pious or righteous. The Hasidic movement was founded by Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov, often referred to as the Baal Shem Tov or the best. Now, Hasidism, some say that if you study with Hasidim, it's Chabad or Breslov Hasidism, they will tell you that they are the third stream of Kabbalah. You have the Zohar, you have the Ari, and then you have Hasidism, and they're the final stream. I'm going to show you there's other streams as well. But what they did for Kabbalah was they took these like the Zohar's maps of the upper world, and they took the Arizal's. You ever been on like you could do it like this? Ever been on so you've been on GPS? You have a GPS, and you kind of have like you zoom out, and you can see like the overall structure of the town, but you can't see the street names. And you kind of zone in, and you can see the street names. So the Arizal kind of showed how like the big map showed all the street names within the maps, kind of showing you how to get around in the upper worlds. But Hasidism was like, that's all great, but we want to live this stuff. We don't just want to contemplate on these upper worlds. And so they took a lot of the terms from Kabbalah and they applied it to the individual. And so they talk a lot about prayer, authenticity, personal connection, the Rebbe, the Hasid, finding Hashem in the world, joy, all these components, they drew it from the Arizal and they applied it to the individual. Gershom Shalom said that Hasidism basically is the Arizal in relation to our soul. So it's kind of trying to describe our souls based on Kabbalah. So you get an understanding of yourself through it, you get an understanding of your connection to God. So it made it really more individual. And so if you go to yeshivas today, a lot of students are learning Hasidism because they want that connection, as opposed to like some of the other works, which is like a little bit more theoretical and hard to connect to. I don't know if you can see this. This is, I can't really see it well. But here's a chart of just like the early early Hasidim. Here's the Baal Shem Tov. Here's the ones you need to know. Maggid of Mezrich, which is his main student. There's others as well. But his student was the first Chabad Rebbe. And then there were 6 more afterwards until the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So that's and so the Maggid of Mezrich basically like had a lot of students, and he kind of helped get the Baal Shem Tov's teachings out into the world. Okay, so that's a little bit to know about when it comes to Hasidism. Finally, and then I'll pause for questions. Let me just introduce you to like the last stages. Some say, so there's this book that Gershom Shalom said Hasidism is the last stage of Kabbalah. Well, and others pushed back against him. Gershom Shalom was a researcher in the previous generation. A lot of researchers in our generation pushed back. It's still going on, Kabbalah. It's like not done with Hasidism. Here's a few examples. Rav Kook. Rav Kook was a Kabbalist. He was also a philosopher. He was a lot of things. He was a poet too. Rav Kook lived from 1865 to 1935. He's first chief rabbi of Israel. Rav Kook took the Kabbalah, whereas Hasidism applied it to the soul. He applied it to the nation. He explained how everything's happening in the land of Israel based on Kabbalah. And so he explained how the nation as a soul, it's on its own, and how the nation is coming back to Eretz Yisrael, and that's combining the Sefirot. There's a lot he talked about in terms of a national approach. And you have Rav Ashlag from 1885 to 1954. He spoke like in a socialistic way about Kabbalah, saying how everything's about coming together as a socialist society and helping each other based on Kabbalah. And then you have other Kabbalists like the Rashash and Rav Getz. Here's a picture of Getz, who lead Kabbalistic yeshivas. So I took, and basically they study a lot of the teachings of the Arizal, and they took it to the next level as well. So you have, it's still going on. Yeah, I want to just show you if we have time. Let me just show you if this works. Here's just like a clip I've just Googled. I don't know if they can see this at home. Here's just people learning in a Kabbalistic yeshiva of the Rashash, the third one I mentioned.
הוא לא רואה מה שאנחנו חס וחלילה. אתה תשמע, אמר טוב אני אבנה על אמן ועל מה דיבר חיונתה וימליך מלכותה ויצמח פורקנה ויקרב משיחי.
Slow he's going and reciting the Kaddish. It's not because he doesn't know the words, but rather while he's reciting it,
He's a Spartak guy. You can hear from the.
perhaps, but also the reason why he's going so slow is he's reading a lot of names of God as he's reciting it. That's just an example, but like here's them learning Kabbalah. Not everybody dresses like this in yeshivas, and there's in Kabbalistic yeshivas, some dress normally or whatever, and not everybody's this old. But not saying that's bad. I'm just saying I don't want you to think that's like.
Where is
Yeah,
this?
this is in Beit El. This is Beit El Yeshiva in the old city.
בין עברי הנשימה לבין עברי העיכול. אז כעת אצלנו כאן
Okay, so they all kind of look the same, interestingly. Let me. So I just wanted to show you that.
I didn't hear, Rabbi. What the picture you just showed? Which
Could you
group
see?
of
Could you see the
Hasidim?
video?
Yes, yes, I saw it. What group of Hasidim are
But
they?
that's what I'm saying is that's not Hasidism. That's why when you say Hasidism isn't the last stage. That's a group called the Kabbalist Yeshiva of Beit El, and they're continuing learning the Arizal's works, the Zohar, and their Rebbe, who's the Rashash, who kind of put together a prayer book based on the Arizal's teachings. So they're learning traditional Kabbalah, and they're not learning Hasidism. So the mysticism is still happening today, being developed beyond Hasidism. Hasidism is a updated, like a more contemporary strand of mysticism, but there's other ones as well. The Rav Kook's teachings are mysticism, and it's not necessarily Hasidism. So,
Got it.
Go out, are really more into the community and reaching beyond themselves.
yeah, that's true too. Yeah, correct. That's a good point. Yeah, they because it was more, they made mysticism more accessible to the masses. I could bring many examples of that, but I'll stop at that for now. Any other questions before we go on to? Okay, so that's a little bit of introduction to text. Let's go on to our some principles here. Okay. All right. The first thing I want to talk about, first principle I want to talk about is how. What is this? Actually, I want to. Okay. The first idea I want to talk about is what we talked about before, is that according to God, first principle is that God's intimately involved in our lives. We're in God, as if we're God's around. We have to see it. We have to open our eyes to see it and do mitzvot and connect to it. The second thing is that our actions, according to mysticism, go beyond our own personal lives. Like they have a ripple effect on the world. You have the ability to impact things beyond your own immediate circle. And so when it comes to mitzvot, there are three approaches to mitzvot, how they impact us. The first one is they have an ethical effect. That's what appears in the summary here. Basically, that we do the mitzvot to become better people. That's why we do it. It helps us improve our character traits. That's a general direction. A second one is mysticism. A mystical approach is that through your actions, you can help others. Through putting on tefillin, you can help somebody in China. Through putting on your mezuzah and observing the mitzvot, you elevate your family and you elevate yourself. And through that, you send blessing into the world. That's a mystical approach. Like you have more strength and power than you really think. Now that could be a really uplifting thought, or that can be like really a downer in the sense that, like, let's say you're not in a good place. Oh no, I'm not just uplifting people up, I'm taking everybody down with me. So it can be like it goes both ways. The final approach is symbolic. Rav Hirsch, Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, was very big on this. He has a book called Mitzvahs as Symbols, where he says like all the mitzvahs are basically symbolic to teach us messages. So I'll bring you an example. Take the mitzvah of mezuzah. You can understand it in all three ways. The mitzvah of mezuzah on an ethical level is supposed to improve our character traits by, thinking about God as you go in and out of our house. On a mystical front, the mezuzah protects your home. It brings blessing into your home by having the scroll there. And in a symbolic way, it symbolizes a lot of things. It symbolizes that God's in our home. It symbolizes that God chose Am Yisrael. So you can understand all the mitzvot on these three fronts: ethical, mystical, and symbolic. But we're talking about the mystical approach. And so I want to share with you a text that really kind of highlights this. So this approach is made up of like 2 or 3 steps. In order to accept it, you have to accept a few things. The first axiom you have to accept is that there are things in reality that you can't see. Okay, now you can say, Rabbi, come on, we're moderns. We believe in science. We can empirically figure things out. We just test it. Well, do we really live our lives like that? Here's a few examples. Wi-Fi. I can't see the Wi-Fi. I can see my phone connecting to the Wi-Fi, but the Wi-Fi is here. I can't see it, right? But it's here. Maybe you could see it if you had some sort of the proper tools to see it. Similarly, atoms. This is never trust an atom because they make up everything, right? So, rabbi joke. But the idea is that atoms. This looks like a table. This looks like a stender. But really, if you go into the molecular level, you'll see a whole different world. So we think that we can see everything for what it is, but it's really not true. There's a whole world that we don't see that is actually happening right now. Okay. Similarly, this is the picture with the carrot. Like sometimes you think that you see what you see on the outside is really what's on the inside. That could be a small carrot, and on the outside you think it's a big one, but it's really the opposite. Similarly, Corona. So we were for many years running around, frantic, hiding, protecting ourselves, quarantining from something we couldn't see. So I think we can say minimally that there are things that are happening in reality that we can't see, but they are happening. Okay, mysticism says there's spiritual things as well that are going on that we can't see, but they're here. Okay, the next stage is that we can interact with them and they can have an impact on us. That'll be the next stage. Similarly, I guess with COVID, like we can be carriers of COVID. Or I could take another example. Wi-Fi. We can go up on the Wi-Fi. We can interact with it, and it can enable us to search the web on a faster speed. And so similarly, you have these mystical forces in reality, and if you tap into them, you can be elevated, and you can elevate others. It's contagious, like in the negative way, like some sort of contagion or whatever. You can impact others, and it can spread. And so that's the idea of mysticism. I think today because we have all these things that we actually can't see, but we know that they're true, it helps a lot in terms of explaining mysticism. And so that's if you can take those two steps. There are things that are here that I can't see. Number two, that we have interaction with them as well. So you can make space for the possibility that we can have interaction with spiritual things in life. If you also reflect on spiritual experiences that you've had, you may have had interface with the spiritual world. Maybe you've gone to a very powerful concert or a sports event or something where you've just felt elated. The energy there was amazing. Or you went to davening and you felt, wow, like I feel like a different person. So that's something you can't see, but that had an impact on you. Maybe you went to a shiva, or you're a funeral or a loved one, and you're saying Kaddish, and you just felt your loved one there. That's an interface with something beyond. You could say, I was just feeling it, maybe it was something going on there. So I'm trying to show you that many of us have some sort of interactions, and we have precedent for things that are here that you can't see. If all those possibilities are there, we could perhaps make space for mystical teachings as well, saying there are things that are in the world that we can connect to, that can impact us, and we can impact for the better. So that would be like the argument for this idea that our actions impact reality. And so let me share with you one more thing. The final slide here connected to that, and then we'll take a break. So this is the Nefesh HaChaim, and he says that, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he says like this. He says that this is what meant by God created man in his image, in the image of God Elohim. So this is for God Elohim made man. For just as God is Elohim, which Elohim means master of all the powers found in the worlds, so too God made us in God's image. So this is Tselem Elohim, the image of Elohim. Elohim means God's in charge of all the powers. So God made us in the image of Elohim. We have the ability to impact a lot of powers as well. So we have the ability to do that because there's things we don't see, because there's energies and forces, and we can have a positive impact on them. And so he says that for the good and for the bad. He says, for via his positive actions, second paragraph, speech and thoughts, who fulfills and invests strength in a number of supernal holy powers and worlds, and adds holiness and light to them. Okay, so this is that's the end of this section. So this is here, a picture here. This appears, I guess, in a religious neighborhood. Tehillim neged Tehillim. You know what that means? What's Tehillim? It's Tehillim. It's Psalms. What's Tehillim? It sounds like Tehillim, but it's Tehillim. Tehillim are missiles. Right. So they say, read Tehillim to protect us from Tehillim, from missiles. It's an intense statement. Yeah, it appears like on the wall of like a religious neighborhood. What? It's clever. It appears throughout Israel. Tehillim neged Tehillim.
Just go to the shelter.
Correct. No one's denying the need to do that as well. It's just saying that there's other modes of that we can employ as well for protection. And so that's the end of that section. So I'll just summarize that section. Like our actions have an impact. Kabbalah says we're not just living in a world that we can see, but there's things that go beyond. And because if we believe everything's connected, you have an impact. And I think that could be a powerful idea today. I think each of these are connected today. That's why I like this idea. That we can do more to help Am Yisrael, even beyond our charity and beyond our advocacy, which are extremely important. We must do that. In addition, through getting stronger in spirituality and being connected, if each of us does that, there'll be more and more atoms building the nation and more positive energy. And I think we'll be stronger and stronger as a nation. And so I'm actually going to talk about that this Shabbat. So in the main shul. Anyway, so anyone have any comments on that part? That's the second principle.
I believe.
Yeah.
I believe.
So I was told to repeat. So it was shared that Sheila believes. Yeah. Yeah. Norris.
So that kind of explains,
Did you hear Norris?
yeah, so that kind of explains when the Chabadniks want you to put on tefillin, somebody put on tefillin.
So that I'm going to talk about actually the Shabbos.
Okay.
Correct. They believe if we can even just get what?
So excited.
Well, because I know it's kind of nerdy, but whatever. But no, I'm excited because I think that I think that we can. even with one mitzvah. That's the idea. So the Rebbe introduced that, the putting tefillin on right before the 6-day war. It was like a few days before it. And he said throughout the 6-day war, like, just put on tefillin. Again, he wasn't saying not to go to war. But the idea is, like, even if you do one mitzvah, that can have an impact. And I think it can be daunting because, like, there's so much to do. On the other hand, it can be very uplifting. It's like, even if I do a small act, I can be elevated and I can send waves of good energy. And it's very empowering. Tzitzis. So I'm gonna. So there's a whole. So I'm not gonna give away the whole sermon, but like there's a whole. But anyway, I'm not gonna give the whole thing away.
Well, we might have to come this year.
Well, unless you want to uplift the world, okay. Yeah. And can you speak loud? I know you're not always good.
Fulfillment is a commandment,
Yeah,
just like mezuzah is a commandment
correct.
on the doorpost of your
Yeah.
house. You know, in the Shema, the translation.
Yeah, tefillin is a commandment, he's saying.
I mean, it's.
So
Somebody told me right after the war started, a friend of mine who is Lubavitch. He goes, if you do nothing else, I said I'm gonna try to go daven more. This would be good.
Can you hear him at home, by the way?
He gave me this suggestion.
Yeah,
I
thanks.
hope you can hear me. He goes, if you do nothing else in the morning, put on your tefillin.
Mhm.
Put on your tefillin, wrap it, say the bracha, and then recite Shema. That's a powerful connection of a commandment, you know, from our source.
Correct. So I'm gonna say what I take from what you just mentioned. What I want to bring to the class is that we don't do it only because it's gonna be good spiritually. We do it because it's a mitzvah. And it does those things. It's important to remember that we're doing it to serve Hashem.
What do we say?
And
one mitzvah will lead to
Correct.
another mitzvah.
so that's also
Like one
yeah.
affair would lead to.
Correct. There's a lot to say on that. It's correct. Thank you for pointing that out. That's actually very important. We put the mezuzahs up because Hashem told us to, and there's reasons as well that are beneficial as we brought. Okay, let's go on to the next principle. So here's some pictures. So I took these pictures from a book there's a book called Mishnata Zohar. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, there's a book by Professor, it's Tishby, I think, and he kind of went through the symbols that appear in the Zohar, that first text we mentioned, for evil. There's a lot of symbolism in that book, so I brought a few of them here. We have amulet against the middle is the amulet against the evil eye. It's like there's amulets that that are extant, that are kind of to ward off evil spirits and stuff. This is against like demons and like the evil eye.
They also have ones for prosperity as well.
Correct. Snake is like a prevalent one. Over there is a klipa, which is like husks or rinds. They're considered like the other side, like the negative forces are considered to be husks that encompass the light on the inside of the fruit on the inside. And then we have the sphera, which I'm not really touching on here. I think we're going to touch on it later. But a message I appreciate from the Kabbalah, and I don't have so much sourcing on this because I want to save time for the final one. But a message I really appreciate in the Kabbalah, I think is very important and helpful, and it's helpful today in our climate as well, and everything's going on in Israel, is that there's a real belief in evil. Like it's not, the Maimonides said that evil is just like a deprivation of good. Like as when there's no good, it's evil. There's evil. But mysticism believes that like there's a real thing, like a force of evil. God created good and God created forces of evil. And we're dealing with them. And they manifest themselves in humans and all kinds of catastrophes and tragedies. October 7th is one of them. Kind of like That's still very fresh. There is real evil. And I think that when as a society forget that there is real evil, that's when it's very much to our peril. It's very much to our detriment. And so that's what I appreciate about Kabbalistic texts. Sometimes they get a little wild, I'm not gonna lie. Like there's a lot of mythical imagery and etc. But the idea that like they're willing to say there's bad things that are going on, there's evil forces, and they manifest themselves in groups and people. I find that like a very sobering approach because I believe that that's true, and I think that when we try to say we try to sugarcoat and just overlook it, I think that it doesn't go away. Yeah.
Isn't that why it's important to be fearful of God in terms of knowing that God is watching you and judging you, and therefore he wants you to be as his image and to be good versus evil, and how it's so important to teach that to your children. They have to be taught how to be good.
Yeah, for sure. Norris is speaking about like the need to follow the Torah and be good in order to stay away from evil, for sure. And there's many ways that we can overcome evil. That's a whole class in itself. You can combat evil head on. You can, some texts talk about bribing evil. Sounds funny, but sometimes if you give it a little bit, you distract it. Like in Rosh Hashanah, we do that with the shofar, if anybody knows what I'm talking about, but I'm moving on to the next topic. Or you can just add more and more light. You do more mitzvahs, and that can banish evil. So there's a lot of ways of dealing with evil. But the first thing you have to know is that there is evil. If we think that all of our neighbors around us in Israel, they want to make they're partners in peace, we're not recognizing that there is real evil in the world, and that there actually a lot of them are out to kill us. And if we overlook that, we're very mistaken, and we're endangering ourselves. And so I appreciate the Kabbalah. They don't get mixed up. There is evil. We have to figure out how to combat it, or to win it, to elevate it, to overcome it. But it exists, and I like that. I appreciate that about the Kabbalah. So here's the text. Yeah.
So you're describing evil externally. Is there evil internally amongst us?
In our bodies, in our beings, in our
The community.
not this community,
Our-
across like down the street. That other man's joking, but yeah. So we have a Yetzer Hara inside of us, and the whole purpose, according to mysticism, is to liberate your holy soul from amid like negativity. So it's like we all were impacted by Adam's sin in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, and that brought evil into the world. Our goal is to liberate our souls from amid negativity. So there's negativity all around. The question is, what do you do with it? Do you fall into it? Do you feed it? Do you embody it, or do you take the Jewish path, which is this text actually, which is we want to kind of focus on the good and elevate the good instead of getting caught up in the bad. So Rav Kook, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but he basically says that there are different approaches to evil. Some see evil in the world and they join it. He says that's like a pagan approach from what is he says like second paganism. He says basically they just like join in with the evil forces. And he says Christianity admits that they're evil and that there is evil, and they try to correct. There's evil, and we have to there's this world, and we have to detach ourselves from this world because we can't. There's just so much evil in the world, so we have to detach ourselves. But Judaism directly combats evil, and not just that. We want to elevate it, take out the good from it, and bring it up to a higher level. And that's the overall approach. It's a very powerful text, but I feel like I don't want to go too deep into it because we're going to get lost in there.
But I do have a question, Rabbi.
Yeah.
So Kabbalists recognize evil is a real thing.
Yeah.
But rationalists also I don't think the Kabbalists have a corner on the market in recognizing that evil exists.
Correct. Well, I appreciate that. What I appreciate about the Kabbalistic approach is that it's willing to say that there's like a certain force of evil that was created. I'm not saying rationalists won't say that, but all the like if you go through, there's probably a lot of artifacts that display the need for protection and amulets that were created in mystical circles to like ward off spirits and negativity. They believed it was something, a real spiritual force. I'm not sure all rationalists would agree with that.
Right.
They would say there's evil, bad deeds is evil. They would define evil a certain way. But this is basically saying there is something in reality that's evil. And we have to find a way to overcome it or to circumvent it or to elevate it. So,
Mhm.
and we do that through adding goodness, at least that's one way.
Does evil have anything to do with free will?
Yeah, 100%. In order for us to have free will, you have to have evil. There's that allows us to choose the good. And so we'll get to that in just a moment. Like, I don't know, it's kind of like late in the class, but I do want to introduce one more thing. Let's see if we can do it. I feel scared to introduce this because like we have a little bit of time left, but I'll just share with you this in general. Next class, we'll do a little bit of review. What? So this is our fourth principle. Not just that there's evil and we should combat it. Is that Kabbalah is very big on taking the good from the bad. Right? So there is bad, but in every bad thing, there's a spark of good. And so even if there is bad, look a little bit deeper, you can find something good. And so it goes back to the story of the Tzimtzum. If you have like 3 minutes of energy to kind of focus, if you could do that with me, I can explain this to you and then I can show you a few ramifications and we'll review it next week, okay? Because this is one of the bigger narratives of Kabbalah. I'm gonna give it over like 2 minutes, but this is called the shattering of the vessels, basically. But in short, when that light went back down into the circle, remember we talked about that light that went down, the God's light evacuated, made space, and then shone back into the circle and created the world. When that light went back in, according to the Arizal, again, the 16th century mystic we talked about, it came down too hard and it created a shattering. Now, according to mysticism, that was on purpose. It was to create a reality that we should have to correct. It was like to create a purpose for humanity. So when it shattered, the light created a shattering. It created this if you look at this picture, like a big shattering, and it created like a broken world. However, in all those shards that were shattered, each one of them still has a remnant of the original light. And what does that mean? That basically means when I'm under a chuppah and I'm marrying a bride and groom, I say we break the glass, right? So many times rabbis will say, I say this as well. We break it because we're not supposed to be, Judaism never wants you to be too happy. We don't say that, but basically we say we want to remember the temple, and also we say I say we are going into a broken world. Your union is supposed to help fix some of those fractured world. And so that's why you break the glass at that moment when you're about to get married, to know you have a lot of work to do in correcting the world. And so the Arizal's teaching this idea of the brokenness, that the world has broken shells, as if, and it's our goal to elevate it and to heal the fractured world. And we do that by elevating the sparks within those shattered vessels. So what does that mean? Here are two examples. Okay. Here's one example, for instance. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov says, you have to judge everybody favorably. Okay. So look at the second paragraph. Well, let's do the first paragraph. I love this source because Rabbi Nachman of Breslov is applying the shattered vessel concept to the soul in a Hasidic way. They always, Hasidism, if you remember from the beginning of our class, it was a long time ago, like 50 minutes ago. Hasidism applies mysticism to the soul. So here's an application of the shattering the vessels, the sparks on the soul level. It's necessary to search and find in him some modicum of good. Everybody has good in them. To find a little bit of good in them. And that little bit, they're not wicked. And by finding a modicum of good, a little bit of good, and judging favorably, you can elevate them and bring them to repent. So here's an example. An individual must find good within themselves. A person must take care to be happy always and to keep very far away from depression. And it may be that when you begin examining yourself, you see that possesses no good whatsoever, and you're filled with sin. And as a result, the evil one wants to push you into depression and sadness. I can't do anything right. I keep failing. I'm bad, etc. All these inner voices that we might have. She says, don't fall into that, Rabbi Nachman Bazov. He was an 19th century Hasidic master. He said, even so, it is forbidden to fall on account of this. Rather, you must search until you find some good. For how is it possible that throughout your life you never did one mitzvah or good deed? And if you begin examining the good deed, you see it too is filled with flaws and contains no purity. He sees that the mitzvah or holy deed that he merited doing is itself comprised of impure motives. Nevertheless, how is it possible that this mitzvah or holy deed contains not even a little bit of good? For in any case, despite this, there must have been some good point in the mitzvah or good deed that he did. So this is one application. We'll talk more about this next week in the beginning of class. But this is one application of the shattering of the vessels. I taught you a big principle. Shattering the vessels is a big principle. It's basically the world's fractured, and in each of these fractures that are in the world, there's an element of good. And by connecting to that good and elevating it and removing ourselves from the bad, we are able to fix the world. So we elevate the sparks through mitzvot, through Torah, and also through finding the good in different things. And so sometimes when you see things you think are very bad, try to look a bit deeper. Try to see what spark of good is there in yourself, in other people. Rav Kook did it with movements, right? He talked about Zionism in the early. We'll conclude with this. Zionism in his time, many were looking at it in a very negative way. The pioneers, saying they're not religious, they're removing the yoke of heaven from themselves, and they're going to create a state which is tameh, impure. And Rav Kook said, look at all the good that they're doing. They're building the land. They're helping Am Yisrael return to the land of Israel. They may be doing bad on the outside, but on the inside, they have good motives. And that's another way of seeing that inner goodness. So Kabbalistic texts believe in the good in things. They see things as the glass half full, not just because that's a good way to look at things, because they believe that everything has a spark and that we can find the good. So it's a very optimistic approach. And so,
how do they justify truly evil people? The Hitlers, the Stalins, the Lenins that killed millions and millions of people. There's no good in those people.
So Rav Moshe Chaim Latzato, he's a mystic in the 18th century. He said that there are certain individuals that are just like Amalek, just like fully bad. Rav Kook brought a Gemara where he says that even it says there's a Gemara where it says like from the sons of Haman, Am Yisrael learned Torah and Bnei Brak, like in a later period. And so he says they may not have any goodness in this world, but they have a spark of good in the upper world, and it can be manifest maybe in a later generation or something like that. So I agree with you. It's difficult to explain this when it comes to like really bad things, also like with really hardcore drugs, but maybe there's in the medical world, there's ways to explain how those can be beneficial as well. I don't know. But like overall, when it comes to negativity, if you take a negative trait like anger. So if you read ethical works, anger's bad and being calm and serene is good or whatever the opposite of anger is. But mystical texts will say sometimes anger is good, sometimes it's bad. Use it, channel it for good. I don't know, being happy. Being happy is sometimes good, sometimes it's bad. Being sad, sometimes you need to be sad and serious. So everything has an application. Everything has a good aspect to it. If you're around somebody in your workplace, in your family, and you have that one relative who bothers you at the holiday dinner, there's definitely points of good there. The fact that you can't see them doesn't mean that they're not there. And so it's a very optimistic approach. Let's summarize. We talked about 3 streams of Kabbalah. What were they? The magical.
The ethical.
They're all mystical.
Theoretic.
No, those are the three explanations to the mitzvah. Three streams of Kabbalah: magical, meditative, and theoretical. Thank you. Okay. All right, and then we spoke about four principles: the God's in everything. We spoke about our second principle, which was the second principle.
No,
Our actions have an impact. That was based on the idea that like there's things that are going on that we don't always see for real in our lives, and so we applied it in mysticism. The third idea was that evil's real. Thank you. You got the notes. Okay, thanks. Evil's real. There is real evil according to the mystical text, and we have to figure out how to deal with it. The last one was that in the evil, in everything there's a spark of good. This is based on the shattering the vessels, which we barely even discussed. It's a very beautiful and like broadly discussed concept. And so that's some principles. Next week we're going to jump into a whole other concept, whole other idea, the afterlife. I just want to share with you some concepts I find helpful. I see Brenda, you wanted to say something? All right, you're about to say something. No, okay. Okay.